Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Ralph Everett. I'm President and CEO of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. And as you know, the Joint Center is a public policy research institution, the only one in the country that focuses on issues of concern to African Americans and people of color. Everything that we do it for the betterment of America and the country, and we would really welcome all of you here today, and I want to thank you for joining us to talk about this very important issue, online privacy. Privacy has long been an issue that our legal system has had to deal with, and as technology pervades every aspect of our lives, the lines have become blurred, and what we once thought was private is now seemingly very public. And I know you can think of many examples where this has occurred in recent times. Whereas before one could keep their doors closed and their blinds shut in their home, but the digital world is much more open and much more complex. Everywhere we go online now leaves some type of digital fingerprint, one that many now say can impact our ability to get a job, track your location, and potentially place all your data in the wrong hands. And in this changing environment, it's become necessary to protect our private data and educate millions of online users taking to the web every day to engage in everyday transactions. And new internet adopters are even more at risk. And we tell them about the promise of the internet, the possibility that their data being compromised can only serve to drive them away from this new engine of opportunity. For those of us those of you here who follow our Media and Technology Institute, we welcome you back to another one of our technology policy forums. And for those of you who are new, we welcome you here today also. And we hope that this discussion will bring together industry leaders, advocates, and policymakers, and will help frame an appropriate framework for understanding and protecting privacy for all consumers. We thank you again for being here, and now I'd like to turn the program over to our Vice President and Director of our Media and Technology Institute, Dr. Nicole Turner-Lee. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, everybody, and good morning. Great day to be in Washington. There's a lot going on up in the Hill today, but today we are talking about privacy, which is near and dear to the Joint Center's heart. I want to thank Ralph Everett for kicking us off this morning and thank all of the panelists from this first panel to the second panel that will be here today. Many of you are familiar with the Media and Technology Institute, the Joint Center. We were founded a couple of years ago to really look at how new digital technology impacts consumers of color. And so this topic is near and dear to our heart because privacy, as all of you know, is actively being debated right now in Washington. And we have to ensure, as we have this debate, that there's an inclusive conversation around how all will be impacted. It's funny, when I was thinking about this panel, putting together my remarks, I thought about all the things that I do in a day where my own digital footprint and profile is actually being captured. Whether I text a friend on my cell phone, post an update to my social networking site to tell them, hey, I'm okay, or the humidity's low today in Washington, or provide my email for a frequent buyers club, pay my bills online, or purchase goods online. All of these transactions leave a digital footprint, and a footprint that over time tells web developers and application providers about our spending patterns, our likes and our dislikes, and our contact information. And coming from Chicago, because I just recently moved here to D.C. about 7 months ago, when the snow melts in Chicago, ultimately your footprint disappears. But in the digital space, it doesn't go away. And so the importance of this conversation today is to really ensure that we find a way to put a privacy framework together that really serves the interests of underserved groups. Underserved groups, as you saw in the announcement of the event, include certain minority populations, low-income people, seniors, people with disabilities, people who have, in many cases, already been profiled in some way. To create an additional profile digitally without knowing the unintended consequences really is something that all of us should be concerned about. On the surface, and all of you know that at the Joint Center, we're really about broadband as a transformational tool and transformational platform to enable communities of color. On the surface, it's an equalizer. But behind the equalizer, there are other things happening that we're excited to have this group of experts here today to talk more about that. Last year, we published a study at the Joint Center on National Minority Broadband Adoption. It was one of the impetus for actually putting this together. And one of the report's many findings indicated that minority groups, when compared to whites, were primarily new to the online experience. Generally, they had less than 2 years. So while all of us are really excited, from our think tanks to our advocacy organizations to our government agencies, about getting more underserved communities online, again, that footprint, much on a winter day, doesn't disappear. In 2000, the Pew American Internet Life Project actually surveyed about 2,000 people on this topic. And what I found to be interesting as a precursor to this first panel, for the most part, people of color are catching up with regards to managing their online reputation. Compared to other groups, they found that less than 50% of African Americans and Latinos regularly checked their names and how they were being used and placed on the web. That has increased, and some of the recent data that's come out of Pew and some data that we'll be putting forth is indicating that more and more people are becoming concerned about privacy. But if we put into this bucket the inability of people to understand the ebb and flow of the internet, my friend Debbie Berlin is here, will talk about seniors, the digital literacy needs that these communities have, the lack of access to hardware in the home and an internet connection in the home. All of these compounding factors, again, may have an unintended consequence down the road. I was reading an article the other day that basically said that all of us that do all these wonderful and joyous things on the web really don't know where it's going. And some of us actually don't want to see where it landed up outside of the person we thought we were sending it to, right? But for the most part, for newcomers to the web, not understanding the complexity of these issues can have a potential impact on their ability to get a job, to get credit, to secure employment, or to secure educational financing, etc. Things that most of us in this room cannot anticipate going forward. So as we listen to the experts today, a couple of key topics I'd like you to keep in mind. What are the legitimate concerns of minority groups with respect to online privacy controls, and how are leaders in the industry working to address these concerns? This first panel represents industry. We wanted to hear from them today to tell us a little bit about what they're doing. It also represents advocacy groups that serve on behalf of those that are disconnected and those that are trying to, like Ross, that are trying to figure out ways to enhance and put consumer privacy controls in place. Another thing I'd like you to keep in mind is how can we ensure that the new data profiles that are being created and aggregated with every interaction on the web do not deepen inequality. As a sociologist, I'm concerned in terms of the unintended consequences of what may happen if we do not pay attention to new online behavioral advertising and targeted marketing that may land up with predatory outcomes. Third, I want you to keep this in mind. How do we increase transparency of how data is handled and managed by third parties, especially sensitive information that once breached can alter one's ability to get credit, secure employment, or find a place to live. Our second panel of legislative leaders will address some of the emerging policies that are coming out of their offices and their agencies. And then finally, a question that I think we often brush over when we talk about privacy: how do we ensure that privacy does not become an additional barrier to broadband adoption? A critical concern, particularly as the FCC and other agencies are espousing ways to get more people online. So I leave you with this, sort of like an aha at the end of the workshop, that if you come away and you think about these questions in a critical way, then we've done our job at the Joint Center. With pending proposals and different actions taking place at government agencies and among these industry leaders as well as advocacy groups, we hope today stirs the pot to ensure what we see will be the net effect of all of our decisions, not just the net effect of one decision. And I close by sharing, as I was thinking about this, how many of you all learned how to drive when you were really young? Now, how many of you would consider yourself a great driver when you were really young? Yeah, right. As my little 8-year-old would say, are you kidding me? Right? All of us enter the road at different rates, and we have different points. And when you're younger, you're more prone to accidents. You're more prone to abuse. You're more prone to your inability to really anticipate the potential harm that comes forward. I look at this debate on privacy and I think about all the new drivers that will be coming onto the internet and whether or not we will create a framework for them that ensures that they do not get harmed. So I leave you there, and I will come back at the end. For those of you that know me, yes, this is one of the first few panels that I will not be talking as much. I'm going to actually lend it to myself,